Yeah, I guess. So just want to make this video to kind of iterate specific qualities in training and how I go about, well, developing them or training them. How I will transition from qualities and kind of what the general proxies for success would be for each one of these qualities of fitness. So I'll generally break fitness up into 5 generic qualities. We'll call it speed, power, strength, hypertrophy, endurance. Hypertrophy just meaning building more muscle, whereas strength is, let's call it the utilization of that muscle. So typically whenever we're transitioning phases or just working on a specific quality, we want to try and start with a minimum effective dose, build to a max adaptive dosage or volume, and then we can start to back off that quality back down to maintenance, which will be lower than minimum effective amount. So again, what is enough to actually get a change in the body? How much can I increase that over time before the diminished returns are not worth the effort? And then I need to back that off to what is the least amount I can do without losing any of the qualities I've developed. That way I can now focus on the next quality we're looking to train. Whenever we are transitioning phases, we'll typically try and go down or up this list. The more we hop around, it tends to be a harder transition, or let's just call it bigger speed bumps that you have to get over to actually start advancing from a technique or skill curve to actually get into that quality zone where you're actually developing things. So whenever we're looking at speed stuff, what I've actually found to be useful is microdosing sprint type stuff throughout the year. That way we're not trying to, one, we don't have a great facility for running sprints, but two, this allows us to just break things up a little more. Sprints can be pretty intense or hard on the body, especially for a lot of our individuals who don't necessarily have a sprint background, and it does have a pretty high mobility requirement, especially paired with all the bilateral sagittal lifting that we do. It can be, again, a big speed bump for a lot of people. So speed is something I found useful, microdose along the way throughout the year. That way it's always touched on a little bit. We don't take it too far to where things start bugging us and they start negatively impacting the other things we want to train. So Sunday sprints, come on by. And I try to display a load, a duration, and a general velocity that each one of these qualities live in. And that way we can best pair our intentions with what we're actually trying to get out of this, because there's no point in running a slow sprint. If I'm doing 10 100s with 30 seconds rest between, those aren't sprints anymore. Maybe that first one was great, and then after that they just go to crap. So I want to train in rep and set ranges with enough rest that allows you to express the appropriate qualities we're looking for: load, duration, velocity. So power, this would be like our oldie phase. This is when we're moving moderate loads for a short duration at a pretty high velocity. So not quite as fast as sprinting velocity, but we are moving a significant load, a moderate distance, moderately fast. So usually I like to see Olympic weightlifting live in a realm of around 60 to 80%, just generally where we see the most actual power output placed or expressed by individuals. Whenever we start nearing that 100%, this becomes much more of a skill curve, a technique that needs to be required, and the bar stop doesn't necessarily reach the same distance or height as, let's say, at 60% or 80%. At some point, the bar only goes up to here, and I just have to drop under it quickly, as opposed to it coming all the way up to, say, my sternum, and I can get a good power clean kind of thing. So, anyways, 60% is that great realm for developing power, and we will move past that for the sake of sport, technique, getting familiar with the actual race pace or competition day scenarios. Strength. This is something that has a high load, a low duration, and a very low velocity. It doesn't typically live in the realm of strength if we're not seeing any sort of like, oh crap, I have to try really hard here. So this usually occurs in your mind when the bar starts to slow down. So let's say rep 1, you had a pretty good down and up speed. Rep 2, the up started slowing down. And then rep 3, you really hit that like, oh God, I gotta try max effort here to stand. That is where strength really gets developed for us. So strength I see in kind of 2 components. You need enough muscle mass to be able to express strength. But strength is very much a neurological component. Can I send enough signals to the working muscle and tone down the signals to, let's call it the antagonist muscle, to be very well synchronized in this movement. Positional muscle leverage during the exercise. So during my deadlifts, am I able to shut down the things that are doing the opposite, and am I able to really fire the things that will help me just stand up off the ground? So strength, I need to see a decrease in bar speed or an oh crap kind of moment mentally to know that we are in the realm of training strength. When it comes to hypertrophy, again, just building more muscle. There's a couple of prerequisites we're looking for. This is a moderate load. This is a moderate duration. This is a moderate velocity. So this is like middle of the ground on everything. If we're too heavy, I can't necessarily get the fatigue or muscle pump that I'm looking for. If it's too light, I have to do so many reps to actually get there. For the duration's sake, again, I do need to get to a point where the muscle is highly fatigued. And then from a velocity standpoint, typically it just treats our joints better over time for having a moderate pace on the down and up. We can still see great gains with a higher rate of repetition or higher intensity in those working sets. It just tends to be harder on the body. So this is where I see it best living. So when it comes to hypertrophy or building muscle, a couple things we need to look at is, one, you need calories to support the tissue that you are adding to the body. Muscle tissue is very expensive tissue and is not something that the body casually wants to just add because it's a potential risk for calories or surviving. So you need a sufficient amount of calories. We need a consistent and increased volume, so amount you have to do to the working muscles. So for example, let's say week 1, I started like 2 sets of 8 on knee extensions. Over the next 8 to 12 weeks, I want to see if I can build that up to as many sets as possible that I can still recover from. And when I say recover, it's not like, yes, I can walk in the next day. I mean, I can still express the qualities I'm looking for out of the training. So if you can no longer hit the rep range we're looking for, or fatigue the muscle, or get a serious pump, then we haven't actually recovered. So again, minimum effective dose, build to a max recoverable, adaptive volume, manageable volume, whatever you want to call it. So muscle pump, just big fatigue for the working muscle, strong mind-muscle connection to it, a large range of motion, typically training these muscles at a more lengthened position. So you can think kind of like the down component of a bicep curl would be the best case scenarios for building muscle mass. And then lastly, endurance. So it's going to be a low load. This is going to be a higher duration, and this is going to be a pretty low velocity whenever we're training this quality. Typically, when I'm looking for endurance training, I want to make sure that we are not getting muscle pump. I don't want you know that feeling when you're riding a bike going up a really steep hill, quads just start to kind of like blow up on you. We're trying to avoid that. That starts to take us back to the realm of hypertrophy or maybe even strength in some scenarios. So endurance, this needs to be something where you are able to breathe casually in our long, steady state workouts. There is going to be another level of conditioning that will be more, let's call it just general high intensity. This is where we're actually developing, let's call it a different way of training your VO2 max versus the long, slow, steady state stuff. So the long, slow, steady state stuff, this is going to help with, let's just call it more roadways, delivery trucks to able to get to the muscle. So we'd see an increase in capillary density, just meaning that the veins that actually get blood to the muscle, you have a few more entry points to work with. So it's easier to drop things off and deliver that oxygen to the working muscle. Whenever we're looking at the higher intensity stuff, this is going to be a scenario where we're actually working on mitochondrial biogenesis would be the term. Essentially, the more repetitions we can perform at this, the more mitochondria is available in the cell, and we just have more energy production that we can get away with during this activity. So essentially, you become more efficient in the activity. So time and place for high intensity versus low steady state stuff, both are still extremely valuable. Again, the more muscle pump I'm achieving, the less kind of endurance it becomes, and the more hypertrophy it becomes. And that's not to say that hypertrophy isn't going to allow you to do like a 3-minute Fran time or something like that. It will definitely help in those scenarios. But endurance will just be more of a longevity, lifespan kind of benefit quality. And of course, it's just good to be able to breathe going up and down the stairs. So that's generally how I'll try and divide my qualities of fitness when I'm working on training, and how I'll transition between them and the general proxies for success I'm looking for when it comes to training these specific qualities. So yeah, again, the general principle here, train and rep in set ranges with enough rest that allows you to express the appropriate qualities we're looking for. So when I am trying to train something, I want to do my best to express my most accurate representation of that quality I'm looking to develop. Hopefully that makes sense. Thanks, y'all. Good luck.